But the reason I went on my own is because I just felt it was time. I felt it was right. I wanted to become a part of my defense because I am such a part of it. Obviously, I'm going to bear the consequences, so why not bear the responsibility of seeking my own acquittal and sustaining my own innocence?
The fear of death has always haunted the human heart. From the moment we're born, we run from it, pretending it's distant, something that happens to others, never to us. But some people forget that fear entirely. People who make choices so dark, so irreversible, that they walk straight toward their own destruction. In the world of crime, desire, anger, and desperation often push humans beyond reason. For some, it starts with temptation. For others, survival. But the road almost always ends the same way, behind bars and eventually inside the death chamber. Tonight, we journey into the minds of history's most dangerous figures, people whose crimes shocked the world and whose final words became echoes of regret, defiance, and truth. These are the souls who began life like any of us, but met their end at the last stop of destiny, death. 1. Ted Bundy, the charmer turned killer. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, an ordinary boy hiding extraordinary darkness. Raised under a family lie, he grew up believing his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. That secret fractured something deep within him. To the world, Bundy was handsome, intelligent, and polite. A psychology student who worked in politics and earned people's trust with ease. But behind that charm was a predator. Between 1974 and 1978, he kidnapped and murdered dozens of young women across several U.S. states. No one truly knows how many. After years of manipulation, escapes, and deceit, Bundy was finally captured in Florida in 1978. On death row, he continued to play mind games, studying law, granting interviews, and pretending to repent. But when the end came, all masks fell. On January 24, 1989, Bundy faced the electric chair. Witnesses said his face was calm, emotionless, as if he'd already accepted what he was. His final words were chillingly simple. Give my love to my family and friends. No apology, no remorse, only silence from a man who once fooled the world. 2. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, the king who built his own prison walls. Joaquín Archibaldo Guzmán. Loera was born on April 4, 1957, in the mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico. Poverty was his first prison. His father grew poppies. His mother struggled to keep food on the table. From that harsh world, Guzmán learned one rule: power means survival. By his 20s, he worked under cartel boss Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo. When that empire fell apart, El Chapo built his own, the Sinaloa cartel, a drug empire that flooded America with cocaine and fear. He ruled through tunnels, money, and murder, slipping through the fingers of justice again and again. 2 escapes made him a legend. One hidden in a laundry cart in 2001, another through a mile-long tunnel dug straight into his prison shower in 2015. But in 2016, his luck finally ran out. Extradited to the US, he faced trial and was sentenced in 2019 to life plus 30 years. Today, El Chapo sits in complete isolation at ADX Florence, a concrete tomb for the world's most dangerous men. He has no final words, only silence. The man who built his kingdom from tunnels now lives buried inside one. 3. Gary Gilmore, the man who said, "Let's do it." Gary Mark Gilmore was born on December 4, 1940, in McCamey, Texas, into a family ruled by violence and instability. His father was abusive, his mother distant, and chaos followed them wherever they went. By age 10, Gary was stealing cars and running from the law. Though intelligent, his rage always won over reason. Years in juvenile centers and prisons didn't reform him. They shaped him into something darker. After 12 years behind bars, he was paroled in 1976 and moved to Utah, trying to start over. He found work, even love, but peace never suited him. Within months, he murdered 2 innocent men, a motel clerk and a gas station worker, for no clear reason. Caught soon after, Gilmore did something no one expected. He demanded to die. "I've been killing myself all my life," he said. "Now let's finish it." On January 17, 1977, he faced a firing squad in Utah. When asked for his final words, he simply said, "Let's do it." Those 3 words became legend: grim, defiant, and later echoed in Nike's famous slogan, "Just do it." His death ended one life and revived America's death penalty. 4. John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown who hid monsters behind a smile. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois. His childhood was a storm of fear and abuse. His father's fists and insults left marks deeper than bruises. To the world, Gacy was polite, cheerful, and eager to please. Inside, he was hollow, desperate for control. He built a picture-perfect life: a wife, children, a small business, and a role that made everyone smile. Pogo the Clown, the man who entertained kids at parties. But behind the painted grin lived something unspeakable. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy turned his suburban home into a nightmare. He lured young men and boys with promises of work, friendship, or escape. They never left. When police finally searched his house, they uncovered 33 bodies buried beneath his floor, a graveyard beneath a clown's home. In prison, Gacy showed no remorse, only arrogance. He painted, joked, and played the victim until the very end. On May 10, 1994, as he faced lethal injection, he smirked and uttered his final words: "Kiss my ass." For his victims' families, justice came at last. For Gacy, the mask finally slipped, revealing the monster beneath the smile. 5. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was born on April 28, 1937, in the small village of Al-Auja, near Tikrit, Iraq. His childhood was marked by poverty, loss, and rage. Abandoned by his father and raised by a militant uncle, he learned early that fear was power, and power meant survival. By his 20s, Saddam had joined the Ba'ath Party, dreaming of building a mighty Arab empire. Ruthless and cunning, he climbed through the ranks by silencing anyone who stood in his way. When he seized power in 1979, Iraq became his personal kingdom. Statues of his face filled the streets. His name was whispered like a prayer or a curse. He ruled through terror, gassing enemies, crushing rebellions, and waging brutal wars. For decades, his word was law, but empires built on fear always fall. In 2003, the U.S. invasion shattered his illusion of immortality. Found hiding in a dirt hole near Tikrit, the dictator who once ruled millions looked small, defeated, human. On December 30th, 2006, Saddam faced the gallows. As the rope tightened, he shouted his final words: "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger." The trapdoor fell, and the era of Iraq's iron fist ended in silence. 6. Raúl Bebe Escobar. Raúl Escobar was born in San Salvador in the late 1960s. A child of war, raised in a world where death spoke louder than dreams. His father, a soldier, never came home. His mother worked the fields, surrounded by gunfire and grief. The streets became his family, and by 15, he had joined Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, a gang forged in blood and survival. They called him Bebe, a cruel joke for a boy who never had a childhood. Violence was his language, and fear was his currency. By his 20s, he was a rising name in Central America's criminal underworld, running drugs, settling scores, and showing mercy to no one. "In my world," he once said, "mercy is weakness. But even kings of the streets grow old behind bars." Arrested in the late 90s for murder and racketeering, Bebe spent over 20 years locked in a cell, watching the same cycle swallow new generations. In time, he found faith, or maybe just exhaustion. On the night before his execution, he smiled faintly at a guard and said, "I was born into violence, and I die with it too." And with those words, Raúl Bebe Escobar, the boy of war, finally met his peace in silence. 7. Thomas J. Grasso. Thomas Joseph Grasso was born on May 23, 1962 in Staten Island, New York. A restless soul raised in the shadow of poverty and bad choices. By his teens, he was already lost to theft, drugs, and the streets. But in 1990, his crimes turned monstrous. That Christmas, he strangled 87-year-old Hilda Johnson, with her own holiday lights, stealing only loose change. Months later in Tulsa, he murdered 81-year-old Leslie Holtz for pocket money. The brutality was senseless, the acts of a man chasing chaos rather than survival. Arrested soon after, Grasso confessed without emotion. He wasn't sorry, just annoyed that his luck had run out. Sentenced to die by lethal injection, he spent his last day writing poems and obsessing over his final meal: mussels, ribs, pie, milkshakes, and most importantly, SpaghettiOs. When the tray arrived, the kitchen made a small mistake. He got plain spaghetti instead. As his final words, Thomas looked straight into the cameras and said, "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti." I want the press to know this. Moments later, he was gone, leaving behind one of history's strangest epitaphs. A killer remembered not for remorse, but for a missing meal. 8. Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann was born on March 19, 1906, in Solingen, Germany. A quiet boy from a disciplined family. Nothing in his early life hinted at the darkness to come. But when he joined the Nazi Party in his 20s, his loyalty and precision turned him into something far more dangerous than a soldier, a bureaucrat of death. As an SS officer, Eichmann became the mastermind behind the logistics of the Holocaust. He planned train routes, deportations, and schedules, numbers on paper that meant millions of lives destroyed. He never pulled a trigger, yet his pen killed more than any gun. Cold, methodical, and obedient, he called it duty. After the war, he fled to Argentina under a false name, raising a family as if his past had vanished. But in 1960, Mossad agents found him, captured him, and brought him to Jerusalem for trial. Broadcast worldwide, the proceedings exposed a man who claimed innocence through obedience. I was only following orders. On June 1st, 1962, Eichmann faced the gallows. As the noose tightened, he lifted his chin and said, "Long live Germany. Long live Austria. Long live Argentina. I will not forget them." The trapdoor opened, and history's coldest servant met the silence he once gave millions. 9. Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh was born in 1968 in Lockport, New York. A quiet boy who believed deeply in America's greatness. He loved guns, war stories, and the idea of standing for something bigger than himself. But after his parents' divorce, something in him hardened. He became withdrawn, polite on the surface, angry underneath. In 1988, he joined the U.S. Army and fought in the Gulf War. He earned medals, respect, and discipline. Yet what he saw overseas changed him. McVeigh returned home disillusioned, convinced the government he once served had turned against its own people. The tragedies of Waco and Ruby Ridge only fueled his rage. In his mind, he wasn't turning against America, he was defending it. On April 19, 1995, he parked a truck full of explosives outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. The blast killed 168 people, one of the darkest days in U.S. history. Calm and emotionless, McVeigh called himself a patriot. On June 11, 2001, he faced execution in Terre Haute. He spoke no apology, only quoted Invictus, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." To the very end, he believed freedom meant defiance. 10. David Mason. I have no final statement. David Mason's story is one of silence, both in life and in death. Born in California in 1956, his childhood was marked by abuse and loneliness. Teachers remembered a smart boy with empty eyes, while neighbors recalled a quiet child who never smiled. By his teens, Mason had drifted into the streets of San Francisco. Homeless, angry, forgotten. Petty crimes became violence. Then between 1980 and 1981, that violence turned into murder. 4 elderly victims, frail, alone, and unsuspecting, were strangled in their homes. Mason robbed them afterward, but money wasn't his motive. It was rage, blind and buried deep. When arrested, he confessed without emotion, describing each killing like a routine. In 1983, he was sentenced to death. For 10 years in San Quentin, Mason spoke to no one. No appeals, no visitors, no prayers. He simply waited. On August 24th, 1993, when asked for his final words, he looked straight ahead and said, I have no final statement, no fear, no remorse, just silence. As the poison entered his veins, his eyes stayed open, empty, unblinking. David Mason didn't fight death. He had already accepted it years before it came. Every story you've just heard is more than crime. It's a reflection of how fear, desire, and choices shape the human soul. These final words remind us that even in darkness, every voice carries truth, regret, or defiance. Death may have silenced them, but their last moments still echo through history. If these stories made you think about life, justice, and redemption, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more untold stories from behind the prison walls. Stories of fear, faith, and the final moments that define a life.